In a time when a woman's fate was determined by the men in her life, death arrived like a thief in the night, stealing away all security and hope. The house that once echoed with laughter now stood silent, 3 widows left to navigate a world that had no place for them. The eldest among them, weathered by years of loss, made a decision that seemed born of desperation. She would return to her homeland, back to the familiar embrace of family and tradition. But for the 2 younger women, this meant facing an impossible choice that would define the rest of their lives. One path led backward, to the safety of their childhood homes, where families waited with open arms and potential husbands could restore their social standing. The other path stretched into uncertainty, following an embittered older woman into a foreign land where they would be strangers, outcasts, with no guarantee of acceptance or survival. The first young woman made what everyone would call the wise choice. She kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, tears streaming down her face, and turned toward home. It was practical, safe, understandable. No one could blame her for choosing survival over sentiment. But the second woman stood frozen at this crossroads of destiny, her heart pounding with a certainty that defied all logic. Something deep within her whispered that this moment would echo through eternity, that her next words would either secure her comfort or launch her into a story she could never have imagined. "Don't ask me to leave you," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried." These weren't just words of comfort to a grieving woman. They were vows that severed every tie to her past, burned every bridge to safety, and cast her lot completely with someone who had nothing left to offer but bitterness and uncertainty. The journey to Bethlehem was harsh and unforgiving. To women with no male protection, no resources, no connections, walking dusty roads toward a future that promised nothing but hardship. The younger woman had traded her identity as a daughter of Moab for the uncertain status of a foreign widow in Israel. But sometimes the most radical acts of love require us to lose everything we thought we needed to discover who we truly meant to become. What do you think of her choice so far? Would you have made the same decision? Let me know in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear your thoughts on this incredible act of loyalty. When they finally reached Bethlehem, the homecoming was far from joyful. The older woman's bitterness had deepened during their journey, and she openly declared that life had dealt her cruel blows. The townspeople whispered and stared, their eyes lingering on the foreign girl who had accompanied her back. Here was where theory met reality. It was one thing to pledge loyalty on the road, another to face the daily grind of survival in a place where you didn't belong. The barley harvest was beginning. An ancient law permitted the poor to glean in the fields, gathering leftover grain after the reapers had passed through. So she swallowed her pride, covered her head, and walked into the fields like a beggar. The work was backbreaking, humiliating, dangerous. Foreign women working alone were vulnerable to harassment, exploitation, worse. But she bent her back under the scorching sun, filling her bag grain by grain, because love sometimes looks like endless, unglamorous service. The other workers watched her with curiosity and suspicion. Who was this Moabite woman who worked with such fierce determination? Why had she come here? What was her story? Their whispers followed her through the rows of grain, but she kept her eyes down and her hands busy. But not everyone was watching with suspicion. From across the field, a man of influence had been observing her unusual dedication. Boaz was known throughout Bethlehem as a man of integrity, wealthy but fair, someone who treated his workers with respect unusual for that time. When he inquired about the foreign woman gleaning in his fields, the story he heard intrigued him. This wasn't just any refugee seeking charity. This was the woman who had made an impossible choice, who had sacrificed everything for loyalty to family. Her reputation had preceded her, whispered through the community as something remarkable and rare. Their first conversation was careful, formal, but underneath the proper words something deeper was stirring. He offered her protection, ensured she had water, instructed his workers to let grain fall deliberately in her path. These weren't just acts of kindness to a poor foreigner, they were the tentative gestures of a man who recognized something extraordinary in her character. She was overwhelmed by his unexpected kindness. "Why have I found such favor in your eyes?" she asked, genuinely bewildered that a man of his standing would notice someone like her. "I am only a foreigner." His response revealed that he understood exactly who she was and what she had done. He had heard about her loyalty, her sacrifice, her radical choice to leave everything behind for love, in a culture that valued bloodline and belonging above all else. He saw past her foreign birth to the heart that had proven itself through impossible circumstances. Thank you so much for staying with this story. Your engagement means everything to me. Trust me, the best part of this incredible journey is still coming, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Day after day, she returned to his fields, and day after day, their interactions deepened from mere kindness to genuine respect, from respect to something that looked increasingly like love. But the gulf between them seemed impossible to bridge. He was a wealthy landowner, a pillar of the community, a man who could marry anyone. She was a foreign widow with nothing to offer but her character. Yet sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the most unlikely circumstances. When two people recognize in each other a depth that transcends social conventions. Her mother-in-law, watching this development with eyes sharpened by experience, recognized an opportunity that could change everything. Ancient law provided a path for redemption, a way for family property and bloodlines to be preserved even after death. It was complicated, risky, requiring courage that would make her road journey look like a casual stroll. The night she approached him at the threshing floor was the night everything changed. Following her mother-in-law's careful instructions, she waited until he had finished his work, eaten and drunk, and settled down to sleep. Then, in an act that required breathtaking courage, she lay down at his feet in the darkness. When he awoke and found her there, her words were simple but loaded with cultural significance. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family." She was asking him to marry her, but more than that, she was asking him to take responsibility for her late husband's family line, to redeem property that had been lost, to restore what death had stolen. It was a proposition that would cost him significantly and bind him to obligations that went far beyond personal desire. His response revealed the kind of man he was. Instead of taking advantage of her vulnerability, he was moved by her boldness and honored her trust. But there was a complication. A closer relative who had the first right of redemption, and honor demanded that this man be given the opportunity first. The next morning at the city gate, where business was conducted and witnesses gathered, the moment of truth arrived. The nearer kinsman was willing to redeem the property until he learned it came with the obligation to marry her and preserve the family line. Suddenly the deal became less attractive, and he declined, clearing the way for Boaz to step forward. In front of the elders and witnesses, the transaction was completed with the ancient ritual of removing a sandal, symbolizing the transfer of rights. But this wasn't just a business deal being finalized. This was a love story finding its resolution, a foreign woman being officially welcomed into the family of Israel, a tale of loss being transformed into restoration. The wedding was a celebration not just of two people finding love, but of a community witnessing something remarkable. The same townspeople who had whispered about the foreign woman now blessed her marriage, praying that she would be like the great matriarchs of their nation's history. When their son was born, the women of Bethlehem declared to her mother-in-law, "This daughter-in-law who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." It was the ultimate vindication of her radical choice, proof that loyalty rewarded becomes a blessing that multiplies through generations. But the story doesn't end with personal happiness. That little boy would grow up to become the grandfather of King David, making her not just a successful immigrant or devoted daughter-in-law, but a direct ancestor of Israel's greatest king. Her impossible choice to follow love instead of logic had placed her in the bloodline of royalty. And if that weren't remarkable enough, her name would eventually appear in the genealogy of someone even greater, someone who would be called the Prince of Peace, the one through whom all nations would find blessing. The foreign woman who sacrificed everything for loyalty, who chose love over security, who gleaned in fields as a poor immigrant, became one of the most honored women in history. Her story proves that sometimes our greatest losses prepare us for our greatest victories. That loyalty rewarded becomes legacy. That love has the power to rewrite destinies we never dared imagine. Her name was Ruth. And today, thousands of years later, her story still whispers to anyone facing an impossible choice. Sometimes the most radical act of faith is choosing love when logic screams for self-preservation. Following your heart when your head demands security. Believing that loyalty rewarded becomes blessing multiplied through generations you'll never see. What impossible choice is life asking you to make? What would happen if you chose love over logic, faith over fear, loyalty over safety? Ruth's story suggests that sometimes our greatest adventures begin the moment we stop playing it safe and start following the quiet voice that whispers, "This way leads home." Because sometimes the foreign path, the uncertain journey, the choice that looks like foolishness to everyone else, is exactly the road that leads to becoming who you were always meant to be. In our next video, we'll explore another sacred character whose story will absolutely amaze you. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't want to miss this incredible journey through history's most powerful stories of faith, love, and transformation.